Welcome back to Beauty Marks Podcast, a space where we embrace our marks acquired through our journey. My name is Elizabeth Savillon, and welcome to another episode of this podcast. On this week's episode, I will be talking about how to be single, because this past few weeks, I actually watched the movie again, and if you haven't, make sure to do so. I watched the movie when I first went through a breakup, and that was such an empowering movie that at the end of it, if you haven't watched it, it's like she's like in a mountaintop, and she like looks back, and then she's like, wow, I finally made it here, of like the wholeness of herself. And I remember that when I was going through my breakup, I was like, I want that to be me, and it seems so far from that. And so now watching it again, it was kind of like a blissful, like, wow, like I have felt like that. Like I feel like that now. And so I wanted to share my experience about that. And before that, make sure to subscribe to this podcast for more episodes. Find value in every week, and you are a OG with the Beauty Marks podcast, you can go to the link in the show notes to support this show. So when it comes to the topic of singleness and how to be single, I wanted to start from the top, because a few weeks ago, I met up with a friend that was telling me like, wow, like I feel like I was such in a rush to get into the next step and to be in a relationship. And I see you, and she told me, and she's like, and I see you, and I feel like you're such at peace like right now in your life because of the path that you've taken. And we grew up, in church culture where like you would get married by 21 to 25. And I was a bridesmaid in a lot of weddings during those years. And that was like my story of like me getting married by 25. And so just seeing where I'm at now and talking to her, she told me, she's like, the one thing that I wish that I would have done is maximize my singleness and like see it as like not trying to get out of it. It's more like I'm in it. So like I'm going to embrace right now. And so that made me think, I'm like, and then watching the movie of How to Be Single again, it was kind of like thinking of that process that not a lot of people talk about to like get to the place where you're okay being single. So this is really for my single gals. If you have gotten out of a relationship, went through a breakup, you have been single for a minute, and you kind of feel like in that weird place of like, okay, you kind of want a relationship, you're open to it, but then it's like maybe you haven't gotten to the place where you're like, I'm okay being by myself. And I'm telling you that it is possible and you can get there. When I first got out of the relationship, I remember a lot of people would ask me like, like, Liz, why don't you just get back out there? Like, enjoy life. Like, you've been in a relationship for a long time. Like, it didn't work out. So, like, like, start dating. And I knew at that moment, like, it was so hard. But, like, I'm glad that I listened to myself, because I was like, I just feel like I'm not ready. Like, I feel like I'm beat up from this. Like, I need to, like, recover and work on some things. And then, like, that will happen. Well, that actually took, like, 2.5 years of, like, not dating at all. And for a lot of people in their 20s, that is unheard of. Like there's people literally that are making videos about like how they can't be single, how it's like go on as many dates as possible, like, but like that is them maximizing their singleness. It's like more on how many people you're with versus thinking about maximizing your singleness and like self and like the things that you can do as an individual without somebody else. And I feel like when you get there, that is like the win personally, because I have seen how now, for fast forward, when I talked about dating, a lot of people had questions about that. Like, okay, how's it going? Like, how are you feeling about it? And I feel like now I see how me taking the time to work on certain things, now I'm dating from a completely different place. And when I go on dates, I'm not thinking about how the person is thinking about me. It's like, no, I'm genuinely like, okay, how do I feel? Like, is it it's a good time? Okay. But if not, like, I know what I want in my head. So like, ultimately, like, I'm not trying to change myself. Like I'm showing up exactly as I am. And so I shared that on the podcast of dating. And so it's just been so different. And also because I enjoy being single, there's a part of it that's kind of also like, okay, I have to make time for it now. So like that means that maybe I don't get to go to salsa twice a week because, that's like a day that I would go on a date. But it's like, it's kind of like a sacrifice versus actually feeling like, oh no, like let me empty out my whole schedule so that I can go on dates. It's just a completely different narrative in the way that I process it now. And also being like, if this doesn't work out, I'm okay because I'm enjoying being single. Like I'm not dating from a place of looking for someone to complete me. Like I lay it out, of like the things that I do want, and kind of like assess based on that, and focusing more on like how I feel when it comes to dating. And so when I was thinking about how it has been from that process to get here, right? Because like this is like the happy ever after, but like through the process, I think the things that I learned were knowing what I need, like listening to what I really, what are the things that I liked, owning and not comparing my time. Like, so it's like if there was people in different seasons, like being able to not always compare that and think that if I had that, then I would be happier. Because I see on the other side that people that I feel like rushed or like weren't fully ready, then they start feeling like they missed out on a season, when it's like you're able to now have the time. And until the season, however long it is, it's like you can maximize that. Like finding out your passions, trying different things, traveling, like working on your mental, physical, emotional health, like spiritually, like your relationship with God. Like there's so many things that you can do right now that when you have other responsibilities, like it's going to shift and your priorities are going to shift. Like I think back to even this podcast, like there's certain things that I know that I wouldn't be able to fully commit to if I had a partner, like my priority or my, weekly schedule will have looked very, very differently. And like, honestly, through my breakup, like that also brought like the stories that I share on this podcast of the lessons that I learned and like things that I experienced, and being able to share that and have that passion to help other people that have experienced the things that I did. And even through therapy and meeting and cultivating community and friendships, like all of that came from the time of me being alone. Like it wasn't because I was being distracted or I had, I was trying to like find someone to like hang out with. Like, no, like there was that loneliness of like the grieving, when it's like, you're literally like, okay, I'm literally alone and I have to deal with my own emotions. And I feel like when you get there, like to that moment, that's like the breakthrough, to feel like, okay, if I date now, it's coming from a different place. It's not because I want to get back on my ex, or it's not because of anybody else. It's like because of me, like how I feel. And it took a long time to like evaluate, to like allow like my counselor, my friends, my accountability to be like, do you feel like I'm like good? And they're like, yeah, like I think you're good to just like be open. And that helped me so much, because I feel like I built that community. I started knowing what I want. I started looking at like, okay, like I feel like my life now is like full. Like I have these hobbies that I enjoy, like, and I'm able also to bring all those things with me, of like, this is kind of who I am as a person. And I feel like being a full, well-rounded person in every area is so important in and out of a relationship. It's like the things that you enjoy with someone and without. And I feel like before I was always on hold for whatever the person wanted, but it's like, no, like these are the things that I like to do. And you can accompany with me if you want, but if not, it's okay too. Finding hobbies, healing, growing, and figuring out what you want is really what has gotten me like here on the other side. And so now I see how like that whole process was needed, because like in the behind closed doors, like that's really what creates what you see today, so like people see the highlight reels, people see like the things that on social media, but it's like the reality is like all of that is work, and it's painful and it's hard, but it's like it can be so worth it, you embracing your singleness. So if you see everyone around you getting married, being in relationships, but you ask yourself, like, do I really want that? Or is the only thing that I'm wanting is like company? Or maybe I feel a little lonely, or maybe I just kind of feel lost right now, and it's figuring that out for yourself first, to know where that like real core need that you have. Because if you're not dating or looking from a good place, like you're going to be back in the same cycle, And so that is something that you guys have heard from other episodes of like codependency and all of that, which you can go back to listen to Maria's episode. And so that is my suggestion and encouragement to you. It is not easy to take the long route that like especially when everyone says like, like the cure to heartbreak is just find someone else. And it's like, no, like what if it's not about finding someone else? What if it's about finding your passions, finding what you enjoy, setting your boundaries, like working on your relationship with your family and friends, your relationship with God, like all those things that you can cultivate now. Like go on the trip that you've always wanted to, like do the things that you've always wanted to, take the risk and the chances now, because this is what you have today. We don't know tomorrow. We don't know how it's going to be and look like, but it's like, I promise you, if you take the route less traveled, you will see how it will benefit you, and you'll feel proud of yourself a few years down the line when you look back and you're like, I really did maximize like my time and I was so happy. During the movie How to Be Single, which I really recommend, she was talking about like her journey of like her trying to like jump into a relationship and like her having like a party phase and her finding like, trying to like really fully like fit that void that she felt. And I have found myself like through watching that, it's kind of like, wow, how easy it is to do that, like even subconsciously, like to be like, okay, I feel this way, let me go find something to distract myself. But then, you have to watch it for like the full story. But towards the end, it was just like the taking ownership of your singleness and seeing it as like, it's not that there's a right way to be single, but it's like, there's a way that you can feel like a wholeness in being single. So it's like, it's not that you have a partner, it's just that you feel like you have a community, you have a strong support system, you feel at peace. And I feel like that is ultimately what we all desire, is to feel at peace within ourselves and with others and the decisions that we make. And so I hope that you feel encouraged, and just a reminder for someone that maybe feels in that in between, or maybe you're just starting, because I know when I was starting in that process, it seemed so far from it. But then I'm able to look back now and I'm like, if I didn't go through that whole process and I didn't go kind of against the norms, then I wouldn't see the results that I do now in regards to how I feel, and making sure that I'm now more open to dating, but I'm also not like obsessed with like, oh my God, I need to find someone, And so I will be sharing my journey throughout the next few months, but I just hope to encourage someone. And if you got something out of this podcast episode, make sure to share it with a friend, subscribe to this podcast, leave a review if you haven't, and I will see you guys next week.